Hey there. So today I'd like to talk about my best and worst pocket knife, which are the same knife, the Fallkniven PXL from Sweden. Um, Now I'm being a little bit facetious here in this title, right? Whenever we say that anything is the best knife, you have to caveat that and say best for what applications, and worst, well, are there worse knives than this? Of course there are. I mean, you could get some garbage at a gas station that is, worse in every way. Um, More honestly, I suppose I ought to say that this knife, the Fallkniven PXL, is my favorite and least favorite knife simultaneously. There are some things I love about this knife, and that will be reasons that I will always keep it, and that I'm glad I have it. And there are some things about it that I really wish were different than they are, and that I will always sort of feel a little put off by. Um, it also happens to be one of my most expensive knives. I honestly don't remember what I paid for it. I bought this knife more than a decade ago. It's still in the current product lineup for Fallkniven, although there's now another version of it that uses a different steel for the blade. We'll talk about that a little bit too. But these are currently going street price, not MSRP, street price for about $310 for this pocket knife. I know that I didn't pay that much for it. It wasn't cheap though when I got it. And I got it actually as sort of a treat for myself. I had given away the sort of most valuable knife that I owned. A good friend of mine is in the military, and he was going off on his first tour of what became several tours. And I gave him my Microtech LLC, my Lightfoot Microtech knife. It is a manual folder. It was, 154 cm, which at the time was fine steel. It's still an okay steel, but it was kind of a little more premium then than it is now. But that knife has become quite collectible. And so I was looking to replace it in my, at the time, fairly small knife collection. Needed a knife that would fill that top spot as sort of my most premium knife. And I saw this and liked it and bought it, even though it's, conceptually and, quite a bit different in sort of its design than the Microtech. This is not a tactical knife. Fallkniven does make knives for the Swedish military, but they are probably better known for their sort of outdoors knives, their survival knives. One of which, well, a lot of those are fixed blade knives. Here's here's one of them. This is the S1. Okay. Pretty classic design at this point, right? Good clip point, fixed blade, outdoor, all-purpose knife, right? A protruding tang can be used as a fire starter. One of the things about a lot of these Fallkniven knives is that they have a convex grind on them, right? So that's a very strong edge. It's not likely to chip. And another thing that is common on a lot of Fallkniven knives that you don't see in a lot of knives is that it is laminated steel. In this case, it's laminated VG10, meaning that it has a core layer of VG10 surrounded by or sandwiched between two layers of softer steel that will give the blade a little bit more toughness, right? So it's less likely to snap if you're putting it to hard use. And yet that middle layer can be harder and can therefore hold an edge longer and be sharpened and retain that sharp edge. Yeah, so these the fixed blade Fallknivens are pretty well established as good outdoors knives, and this is no exception. I'm pretty happy with this knife. You can see I've used it some, um, and yeah, it's among the fixed blade knives that I would sort of be most likely to take with me if I was going on a camping trip and planning to do a little bit of, bushcraft or just general purpose camping tasks. Comes in a thermal run plastic sheath, nothing special, but perfectly, usable, and good time tested design. This knife is also a laminated steel, and it's more special than the laminated VG10 in that film even. Laminated VG10 is fairly common at this point. I mean, it's definitely not what you see in most production knives, but there are plenty out there that have used this now. One that I have that I think is really cool is this little M-Custa. This is the M-Custa Petite, and this is VG10 sandwiched between a couple layers of Damascus. And so you have that cool look of the Damascus, but then you have a little better performance from that, from where the edge protrudes, which is a different steel. This is the VG10 steel that's actually doing the cutting at the leading edge, right? You also see VG10 laminate steels on things like cold steel knives, some of their fixed blades. You can see the laminate line here on this Taipan, right? You can see that line where the softer steel on the outer layers meets that center layer of VG10. I think the outer layers on this are probably VG2, right? Which is another Japanese steel made by the same company that makes VG10, but it's about like 420J steel, if you're more familiar with that series. It's not designed to be a cutting edge. It's designed to be a tougher steel that's used for things like, the liners and the frames of knives more often than the blades. But it'll work fine as an outer layer of a laminated blade. Right, so you do find laminated steel blades that have a more exotic center core material, like this unfortunately pretty beat up Spyderco Dragonfly that is laminated with a core layer of super blue steel, also Japanese steel. This is super blue with 420J as the outer layers, right? And this one, that is just a travesty. I let Austin Blades sharpen this for me, and they burned the edge, and they kind of put a little bit of a tiny recurve in it, which is not the original shape of the blade. So last time I'm going to let somebody else do my sharpening for me. But yeah, you see, sometimes people will use a steel like HAP 40, which is not stainless, or Super Blue, which is not stainless, as the edge of a knife, but then they'll put a stainless steel as the laminate outer layers, partly because that'll make it so that you don't have marks of corrosion all over the whole blade, just the sort of the protruding edge piece there. All right, but this is different. The PXL is different. It is laminated. You can see that laminate line there where the blade, the different metals of the blade come together. And that center layer, in this case, is Super Gold SPG. You can see where it says here it's stamped 3G steel on the blade here. 3G is what Fallkniven calls this this laminate. The whole thing is 3G. The actual components of 3G are super gold steel, SPG in the core layer, and then VG2 on the outer layers. So super gold steel, SPG, is a powder metallurgy steel that shares a lot of the same properties as S30V, and it actually predates S30V. You know, a lot of people who are into knives will tell you that S30V was the, you know, sort of first powder metallurgy blade steel that was developed specifically for making cutlery, and that's, you know, approximately correct. But super gold actually predates S30V, and cutlery was among its original intended purposes. It's a Japanese steel made through a powder metallurgy process, and actually chemically is very similar to S30V with a few little tweaks. It has a little more chromium than S30V. It has a little less vanadium, and it has a little more molybdenum. In use, that means that you're going to have fewer vanadium carbides, right? Vanadium forms carbides, which help give you a hard edge, a toothy edge. So reducing the amount of vanadium in the blade is going to give you fewer of those hard carbides, but you are also going to get more molybdenum carbides. Molybdenum, it's a difficult word to say. I'm not sure that I'm saying it quite right either, but we'll go with that. Molybdenum is also a carbide forming component of steel, and it forms carbides that are a little softer. They're a little easier to sharpen than the carbides that you get from vanadium, which means that they're going to be you're going to be able to get a mirror edge polish on this knife, and it's going to sharpen more easily than an S30V knife would. And you're going to get relatively similar performance out of it, really. You know, as I said, the chemical composition is pretty similar. It's just a little bit tweaked in the percentages. But you know, like S30V, it's going to have you know, good hardness, good edge retention, fairly good toughness, and it's also corrosion resistant, right? So that center layer is that SPG, and then the outer layers are VG2, which, you know, is tougher, right? It's tougher than S30V. It's tougher than SPG. It's going to give the blade a little bit more imperviousness, and make it extremely unlikely that this would snap. Now, it could still chip along the edge, and in fact, that is a concern, although this one has not. And I have used this knife. I mean, you can see, you know, some little carry marks and stuff like that. But I've used this for breaking down some boxes and things like that. I probably shouldn't have, since it's, you know, a collectible knife. But I have not really done much to maintain this knife either, right? It's still pretty sharp. It was screaming sharp when I got it. I have honed it a little bit on a ceramic rod, but I have not really had to do much edge maintenance at all. It has really retained that edge for a long time. And I'm really impressed with this blade steel, right? It's fantastic. And, you know, the blade geometry is good. It's, you know, not quite a spear point. It's a drop point, but, you know, high flat grind, or saber grind, I guess you could call that. Significant swedge up here. You know, the spine, the thickness of the spine on this is about 0.13 inches, right? and the thickness behind the edge. This caliper is not the world's greatest caliper, but yeah, 0.02 inches is what it's telling me. You know, it's not the sliciest knife in the world, but it's good and be great at sort of hard use tasks. It's an okay whittler. I have used it on some wood, and it's you know, just I'm really pleased with this blade. I mentioned that it was screaming sharp. One of the first things that happened to me when I got this knife was I cut myself on it, and that is yeah, okay, well, the blade was really sharp, but the reason I cut myself was that these thumb studs suck. So it's a liner lock. You can see it's a really early lockup, right? That's, I mean, it's plenty strong. It's not going anywhere. There's just absolutely no movement. It's completely, you know, there's no wiggle at all. But, you know, I'm used to seeing knives that don't lock up quite that early, but it will cut into the tang probably over time, and after enough use, it'll be locking up a little bit later. But the thumb studs on this are, first of all, they're tiny, right? They're kind of jeweled, by which I mean they're just kind of like, they have some little decorative tooling on them. They're really small, and they're positioned in a kind of a weird place, right? I mean, if there's a sort of a cutaway here, and you would expect the thumb stud to be sort of in the middle of that cutaway area, but it's not. It's over here where the bolster kind of rises a little bit to a point. So it's not, you know, I mean, yes, you can come in this way and get it, which is what you have to do, kind of pushing up. But, you know, I'm more used to knives where you push a little bit more out than up, and I think this would just pivot better if this was located a little bit further down, although that would kind of move it into the cutting path, right? I mean, it does pretty much stay out of the cutting path, which is going to be helpful for sharpening and also helpful for cutting. So I understand why they put it there, but in terms of just like the balance of it, it's not, I mean, this knife is not flickable at all. And, you know, when I was used to knives where you'd push more out than up, I kind of pushed a little too much out on this, and I don't know exactly what happened, but I sort of slid off the thumb stud and cut my thumb. Let's see if I can, kind of an awkward position to hold this in. Can you still see the, yeah. Yep, you can see the line there. That's where I cut my thumb on this knife more than a decade ago. It was a pretty good cut. I probably should have gotten some stitches, but I didn't. And when I cut myself, I was surprised, and I lost control of the knife. I dropped it, and I was standing up, and I dropped it, and it fell straight down it was near my body, so it sliced open my pant leg at the pocket and cut the leather of my wallet. I had a wallet in my front pocket, and so this the very first, you know, I mean, it wasn't maybe the first time I opened it, but it was among the first couple of times that I opened it when I got this thing. Yeah, it cut my finger, cut through my denim pant leg, and through the wallet, through the top layer of leather on my wallet in my pocket. Could have been worse, right? So it was a little bit embarrassing, but I share that with you just to say, if you are handling this knife, be careful with it. Those thumb studs are tiny and slippery and not positioned where you might be used to them for sort of leverage, right? But it does open up and lock up nicely, and once you're used to the sort of way the leverage works on this, it's fine. It is not a flickable knife, though. You're not going to be doing spidey flicks with your middle finger and stuff like that. It's yeah, really not going to work for that. The handle on this is, in this particular case, it's burgundy micarta. It's also been made in a sort of an off-white micarta, which is beautiful. And there's also a green micarta version. And there's a black model of this knife that has different handle materials and different blade materials. I don't know if it's G10 or something else, but it's not micarta. And then the blade is laminated cobalt steel, which is another thing that Fallkniven uses on some of their models. But that model is like half the price of this 3G model. All right, so I talked a lot about the blade that I like quite a bit. I talked about the thumb stud that I do not like very much. The micarta is fine. It's smooth, right? It doesn't have the sort of like grippiness that you might experience with some other micarta handles from other companies. It has a nice appearance to it, and it's fine, perfectly suitable handle material, but it is not grippy in the way that some micarta handled knives are. Steel bolsters, which add a lot of weight. That's another downside of this knife, is that it is a pocket anchor. Let's go ahead and weigh this thing. Okay, and I'm going to change this to ounces. And 6 1/4 ounces for a blade that's less than 4 inches, significantly less than 4 inches. So that's heavy. For comparison, here's a Spyderco PM2, which is full-sized knife that is not particularly lightweight, but that's 3 3/4 ounces, so G10 scales. Here is a Buck 112. This is the drop point version of the Buck 112, but it's just a 112. 6 1/8, 6 ounces and 1/8. This is even heavier than a Buck 112 with its brass bolsters, right? And similar blade length. I mean, the blade on the PXL is broader and maybe a little bit longer. Yeah, it's appreciably longer than the blade on the Buck 112, but it's in the same ballpark. And it's almost as heavy. And the Buck 112 is definitely a pocket anchor. Buck 110, right, which is bigger than the PXL, longer, has a longer blade, is, I think, a little heavier than the PXL, but it's one of very few knives in my pocket knife collection that actually weighs more. That PXL is among the heaviest knives that I own. Not quite as heavy as this Buck 110, but it's up there. And of course, the Buck 110 is meant to be carried in a belt sheath, whereas this PXL is meant to be carried with a pocket clip. And this is not the worst pocket clip that I've seen, but it's a bad one. First of all, the carry position for this is only one position. It is tipped down right side, right? Like most knife enthusiasts, I prefer to carry tip up most of the time. Tip down is doable, right? Which also means that when you're holding the knife, this pocket clip is going to be up, in the front of your hand instead of back in the sort of the back of your palm. which actually works out fine. I mean, it's broad enough that it's a kind of a flat surface, and it's not poking me. It's not creating a terrible hot spot. So in use, with the blade open, this pocket clip, even though it sticks out, it protrudes quite a bit. It's not terribly uncomfortable. For a pocket clip that is so, that sticks out so far, the length of it is oddly short, right? I mean, it's barely extends past the bolster. Which, if you have lightweight fabric in your pant pocket, this thing's going to be a little top heavy, and the pinch point is going to be up there near the top, and so it's going to kind of lean away from your pocket, and it's going to be not quite secure. It's going to kind of bounce around in your pocket some. If you've got heavier weight material, the fabric of your pants is denim or something, it's not bad. It will slide over that material pretty easily, and this bill, one of the good side effects of having such a high pocket clip is that the bill is low, so it's not poking out too much, even though it does go up so that it can get over the edge of your fabric. It's not going to poke you in use in hand, right? So yeah, and it is deep carry, right? So this thing will almost completely disappear into your pocket. But it's weird. It's a weird pocket clip. I mean, this knife is not small. It's sort of in the middle of the handle. It's about 0.65 inches. But then at the height of the pocket clip, the highest part of the pocket clip, it's 0.88. That's like almost an inch wide there. It's substantial. And of course, most of that's going to be outside your pocket, so it's not going to be filling up your pocket, or not most of it, but a big piece of it is going to be outside of your pocket. But it's still part of the knife, part of the overall girth of the thing. So yeah, it's a big, heavy knife with kind of a weird pocket clip, terrible thumb studs, super early lockup, full steel liners with no weight relief whatsoever. I mean, it's not drilled out, it's not milled out. It is just full on steel, thick, substantial, full steel liners with steel bolsters. So it feels substantial, which is kind of reassuring. I mean, you can definitely tell when you're handling this knife that this is a knife that's going to last a long time, and it's built to last and hold up well. But the cost comes at the cost of being heavy and kind of a little clunky, right? It's sort of gentlemanly, which is a little different, right? Because Fallknife I usually associate with being sort of outdoorsy kind of knife. You could certainly use this outdoors, right? It's got washers in the pivot, not ball bearings like a lot of more contemporary, newer knife designs, which means it's not going to get gummed up. Yeah, it's, I think that if you're talking about sort of what it's comparable to, I mean, aesthetically, it's got a little bit of the same aesthetics, maybe, sort of, as the Benchmade Crooked River. This is the full-size Crooked River. It's closer in size probably to the mini Crooked River. Minus the like orange stuff, right? I mean, it's got those metal bolsters, which is kind of a little bit old school. This has the S30V blade, which is going to give you kind of similar performance, and it's an outdoorsy / gentlemanly knife, which is kind of a weird intersection of different purposes. Despite being larger, quite a bit larger than the PXL, the Crooked River is lighter, significantly lighter, and that's largely because of the bolsters are aluminum, and this has full steel liners, but they are drilled out. They've got, you know, big holes taken out of them, which doesn't really compromise strength at all. You know, for any practical purpose, this is going to be just as strong as the full steel liners in the PXL that have no weight relief. And you know, the axis lock on this, like that PXL, great lockup. And this is not cheap. It's getting up there close to $300, but it's, you know, it's less expensive than the PXL in terms of street price right now. Another knife that I have that kind of has some of the similar elements as the PXL is this MKM. This is a Bob Terzuola designed knife. This is the MKM Maximo. This has a premium blade steel. It's M390. Similar, you know, it's a drop point shape with a swedge. It's actually kind of similar in terms of the look of it and the size of it. This one even has burgundy micarta handle scales, but that's a SMKW, Smoky Mountain Knife Works exclusive. Yeah, it's got the burgundy micarta on one side and titanium on the frame lock side. This is significantly less expensive. This is basically half the price of the PXL. And, you know, I've talked about this knife before. The flipper on this is not great. It's kind of a little bit slippery. There's no jimping at all on the flipper, so you can slip off of it instead of opening it. But, you know, there's no flipper at all on the PXL. You use the thumb studs, which this also has thumb studs. It's got some jimping on the spine, which the PXL does not. There's no jimping anywhere on the PXL. It's completely smooth. Nice crown spine on the Maximo. Stonewash finish instead of a satin finish, which, you know, if you're going to actually use the thing, is probably better in the long run. You know, this one, obviously, I haven't put it through a great deal of use. Some people say that the M390 is not as hard on the MKMs as would be ideal for that particular blade steel, but I'm sure it's still a pretty good performer. One thing about the, I mentioned that the Super Gold steel, the sort of center layer of this laminate in the 3G, is similar to S30V, and it is, but it's also, the sort of like working hardness for this is higher. So, you know, an S30V knife, properly heat tempered, is going to be in the range of like 59 or 60 on Rockwell hardness scale, whereas the SPG is going to be higher than that. It's going to be 62-ish, which is significant, right? You would expect that a knife with harder Rockwell scale numbers is going to be harder to sharpen. That's not the case here because of the difference in the molybdenum and vanadium content between S30V and SPG. But it you know, does retain an edge nicely. So it's, you know, it's sort of a little bit of a kind of a sweet spot in terms of hitting all the pros and cons in the right right balance. So yeah, this is absolutely one of my favorite blades on a knife that overall has a lot of problems, right? No jimping, heavy, not weight relieved, kind of a weird clip, terrible thumb studs, not grippy. You could definitely slide off of this and cut yourself, as I did. Yeah, I mean, it's got some downsides for sure. That's a quick look at the well, not that quick. We're over half an hour at this point, but that's the Fallkniven PXL. My favorite and least favorite pocket knife, all in one. All right, thanks.